I'm Eleanor, 36 years old, and I used to think I had it all. A devoted husband, a cozy house in the Boston suburbs, and a stable job in interior design. Every morning I woke up next to Noah, the man I believed would walk through life with me. But life, as I learned, can change in a single, fleeting moment, like a clock suddenly stopping when no one expects it. That day was an October afternoon, the air turning crisp, the maple leaves glowing red. I was making tea in the kitchen when the phone rang, and the voice on the other end made the teacup slip from my hand and shatter on the tiled floor. "Is this Eleanor Miller? We're very sorry. There's been a serious car accident." That sentence shattered my entire world. Noah, the man who used to gently buckle my seatbelt before every drive, was gone, forever. All because of an out-of-control truck on the highway. The accident was so severe that his body wasn't intact enough for an open-casket funeral. I stood frozen in the morgue, clutching the edge of my coat, trying not to collapse under the weight of a shock no one could prepare for. The days that followed were a relentless whirlwind. Paperwork, decisions, phone calls, tears. If my parents hadn't flown in from Ohio to help, I don't know how I would have made it. My mom held me for a long time, her voice trembling. "Sweetheart, let Dad and me take care of the funeral. You need to rest. Cry as much as you need to." I let them arrange the funeral home, choose the flowers, and contact the headstone engraver. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Noah's smile, warm, genuine, now only living in scattered frames throughout our house. Noah was responsible and always planned carefully for the future. Because of our honest conversations, he had set up a life insurance policy and managed his assets meticulously. After his passing, I inherited everything he left behind. A spacious 2-story home in the suburbs, a small apartment downtown we used to rent out on Airbnb, and nearly $5 million in savings, the result of years of disciplined saving and wise investing. Noah's lawyer, Mr. Peterson, handed me a stack of documents and a copy of the will. His voice was soft but clear. "Noah wanted you to be secure, Eleanor. He planned so that if anything ever happened, you wouldn't have to worry about finances." I nodded quietly, feeling like I was floating through a dream. Money couldn't fill the void Noah left. Numbers on paper couldn't replace his laugh every evening as we cooked dinner, or the tight hug he gave me every morning before work. I still remember the last time we spoke, just a few hours before the accident. He called to ask what I wanted for dinner, his voice as playful as ever. "You pick, but don't say pizza again, okay? That's 3 weeks straight." I laughed, never thinking it would be the last time I'd hear his voice. After the funeral, I began cleaning out the closet, touching each of Noah's shirts, folding them as if he might walk back in at any moment. Every corner of the house reminded me of him, from the table he built for me to the wall clock we picked out together during our trip to Vermont. There were nights I sat for hours in the living room, the dim light casting shadows on our wedding photo hanging in the hallway. I talked to him, as if staying long enough, speaking earnestly enough, might somehow bring a response. But the only answer was the deep, unending silence. I didn't know how to go on living in a world without Noah, but I also knew I couldn't let myself fall apart completely. Somewhere, I believed, he would want me to keep going. Not just surviving but truly living. I still didn't know how that would begin. But I stood up slowly and started taking the first steps, even if I still felt completely lost in a life that had just shattered. After Noah's funeral, I returned to the 2-story house once full of memories, now strangely hollow. Mornings waking up to silence, dinners for one, conversations that only echoed in my mind. I began to fear the quiet, the very thing I once found peaceful. What surprised me most was the shift in how my parents treated me. I was the eldest in the family, but growing up my younger brother Scott always got more attention. Scott was outgoing, the school's football star, while I was the quiet one, tucked away with books and half-finished design sketches. When I got accepted into the architecture school in Rhode Island, my parents just said, "Good job, honey," then went right back to planning Scott's summer vacation. But this time things were different. My mom called every night, just to ask if I'd eaten, if I was sleeping okay. My dad sent emails with interior design articles he thought I'd enjoy. One evening, as I curled up on the sofa with a cold cup of tea in hand, the phone rang. It was Mom. "Eleanor, come home this weekend. I'm making your favorite roast and Dad will open a bottle of red wine. We can play cards like we used to." I was silent for a few seconds, Not out of surprise, but emotion. How long had it been since Mom cooked something just for me? That weekend, I returned to the suburban Ohio home I grew up in. Everything looked the same, but the air felt different. Warmer, closer. Dinner felt like we were the perfect family again. Laughing, reminiscing, and for the first time in months, I felt my heart soften. After that, family dinners became a new routine. Every Saturday I drove to my parents' house. Mom made dishes rich with memories and Dad told old stories from his construction job, like we'd never drifted apart. One night, as I was washing dishes, Mom gently said, "Eleanor, you've lost so much. If you ever need anything, even financial help, we're here." I set the plate down, dried my hands and turned to hug her. "I'm okay, Mom. But if it makes you feel better, I can send a little money each month, so you both can rest easier, and so I feel like I'm still doing something that matters." Since then, I've sent my parents $2,500 a month. No one asked me to. I did it because I wanted to. There's something about taking care of them that makes me feel a little less alone. I also started working again, part-time, taking on small design projects for old clients. What I didn't expect was how healing it would feel to return to work. I began filling the empty spaces in the house. I repainted the living room, took down old photos, but kept a few that Noah had taken. One night after dinner with my parents, I was about to leave when Dad stopped me. "Hold on, Ellie. There's something we want to ask." I turned back, car keys still in hand. "What is it, Dad?" He looked at Mom and then they both looked at me, serious but gentle. "Scott's been having a tough time lately," Mom began. "His job's unstable and he just split up with his wife. We're thinking of ways we can help, but..." I frowned. "But what?" Mom took a deep breath. "He's thinking of moving back in with us for a while, but the house is kind of cramped, so we wanted to ask, would you consider letting him stay in Noah's downtown apartment? Just for a few months?" I stood still. That apartment, even though I didn't visit often, still held precious memories of Noah and me. We used to call it our secret retreat whenever we needed to escape the chaos of work. I'd never imagined anyone else living there. "I'm not sure," I answered slowly. "That place still isn't ready for someone else to walk into." "It's just a suggestion, sweetheart, no pressure," Dad quickly added. "We understand." I nodded, but inside something stirred, a familiar feeling, being pulled back into the role of the one who always sacrifices. But this time I knew I had to think carefully. That night I drove home through rows of bare trees, my mind circling around one question that wouldn't go away. Is this concern truly unconditional, or just the beginning of something else? I hadn't even had the chance to make a decision about letting Scott stay in the apartment when another figure unexpectedly entered my life, and with undeniable impact. One afternoon in early June, as I sat on my parents' porch with a glass of iced tea in hand, my mother stepped out, her face lit with barely contained excitement. "You'll never guess who's coming," she said, her eyes sparkling like she was about to welcome a TV celebrity. Before I could respond, a white SUV pulled into the driveway. The door opened and out stepped Isabel, my half-sister, who had left this town nearly 6 years ago and rarely kept in touch. Isabel, 31, used to be the shining star in my parents' eyes. She studied film in California but dropped out to chase a string of startup ideas, none of which lasted more than 3 months. Last I heard, she was working as an assistant to a popular TikTok vlogger in Austin. And now, here she was, heavily pregnant, glowing, and looking confident. "Eleanor," she exclaimed as if we were still close sisters, running up to hug me without waiting for a reaction. I instinctively stepped back a bit but reluctantly returned the embrace. "It's been a long time," I said softly, trying to keep my tone neutral. "You haven't changed," Isabel said with a smile, rubbing her belly. "It's a boy, 8 months along. Surprise!" I looked at Mom. She was trying to hide her emotion. Clearly this wasn't news to her. "She called me a few weeks ago," Mom explained when she saw me frown. "We thought it would be wonderful for the whole family to be together, especially during this time." The whole family. Those words sent a chill down my spine. I was used to being overlooked, but Isabel's return. In her designer maternity dress, flawlessly made up like she'd stepped out of a magazine, made me feel pushed to the sidelines all over again. That night as we sat around the dinner table, all the attention was on Isabel. Mom kept checking if she wanted anything special to eat or needed more pillows for support. Dad reminisced about childhood memories of hers I'd never heard before. Even Scott, usually blunt and gruff, was unusually gentle, asking what the baby's name would be. I sat there in the middle of a warm family dinner, feeling completely invisible. When the conversation turned to preparing the nursery, I blurted out, "So, who's the baby's father?" The table fell silent. Isabel looked up at me, her smile still in place, but her eyes sharpened. "That's personal," she replied, her voice light as air but cold enough to stop any further questions. Mom jumped in. "Eleanor, your sister's tired. Don't ask things that make her uncomfortable." I bit my lip, gripping the edge of the table. When I was going through fertility treatments with Noah, my parents wanted to know every tiny detail: the medications, the appointment schedule, the blood test results. But with Isabel, they called it privacy? I left after dinner, turning down the invitation to stay overnight. As I headed to my car, Isabel followed, calling out, "You still ask blunt questions like you used to, huh?" I turned around, the porch light casting shadows on her face. "I just asked what everyone else is thinking but too afraid to say." Isabel shrugged. "One day you'll understand. Some things just aren't for everyone to know." I didn't reply. All I felt in that moment was a chill, not from the weather, but from instinct. Something wasn't right. There was something behind that confident gaze I couldn't yet name. And deep down I knew one thing for sure: the real storm was only just beginning. I didn't see Isabel again for 3 weeks after that tense evening. She stayed at my parents' house, resting and being treated like a queen carrying the family's future. I kept my distance, not wanting to fall back into the old cycle of comparison and pain. But then, one Thursday afternoon, while I was reviewing design plans for a small hotel in Vermont, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "Isabel's baby shower is next week at the house. Please come, she really wants you there." I stared at the text, torn. Part of me wanted to decline: the schedule, the distance, the emotions. But another part reminded me that she was still my sister, no matter how strained things were. I thought of Noah, of what he might have done in this situation, and finally replied with one word: "Okay." That Sunday I drove to my parents' house with 2 carefully wrapped gifts: a new baby monitor and a hand-knitted blanket I'd been working on for the past 3 weeks. Despite my inner doubts, I kept a polite smile on my face as I stepped into the house, now transformed into a vibrant party space. The house was filled with soft yellow and mint green balloons, cupcakes shaped like baby elephants, and a 3-tiered diaper cake that looked straight out of a photo studio. Isabel emerged from the living room in a champagne-colored silk maternity dress, her makeup flawless, lips painted a deep red, radiant and center stage, like a character from a TV drama. "You came," she beamed, hugging me tightly as if none of the tension had ever happened. I returned the hug half-heartedly, scanning the room full of strangers: Isabel's college friends, Mom's garden club ladies, and a few unfamiliar faces. The party rolled on with the usual games: ribbon belly measurements, baby name guessing, due date predictions. I stayed mostly quiet, keeping a calm demeanor until Isabel began opening presents. She made a show of everything, gasping, laughing, hugging each item like it was a treasure. When she got to mine, she paused. Her eyes lingered on the blanket, and I had the odd feeling she was calculating something. She held up the blanket, examining it as if waiting for a cue, then gently tapped her glass with a silver spoon. The room gradually quieted. "I have something special to share with everyone today," Isabel said clearly, her voice echoing in the silence. "It's not just about the baby, but about the person who made this miracle possible." I felt my back stiffen, my hand clenched the edge of the chair, a terrible sense of foreboding crept into my chest. "I know many of you are curious about the baby's father," Isabel continued, her eyes scanning the crowd before settling on me. "And today, I think it's time to share." My heart pounded, my breath caught, as if the air had thickened. "The father of my son," she said, each word landing like a stone, "is Noah Miller, Eleanor's late husband." The air froze. Laughter died. Eyes widened, mouths dropped open. My mother's hand trembled, spilling drops of water onto her dress. Someone whispered behind me, "What did she just say?" I couldn't make out the rest of the murmurs. All I could hear was the pounding in my ears. Everything blurred, the room spun. All eyes turned to me, then back to Isabel, who was now smiling softly, as if she'd just shared the sweetest news. I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. Mom rushed toward me, her eyes filled with worry. "Eleanor, don't. You have to understand." I didn't let her finish. I turned, walked past the pastel-colored dessert table, through the kitchen where we'd once shared family meals, and out the front door into the thick summer air. The scent of lavender from the garden hit me, but it couldn't soothe anything. I felt like I was falling, weightless, through a nightmare with no end. I drove home like a sleepwalker. When I locked the door behind me, I realized my hands were shaking too much to take off my shoes. That night, I didn't eat, didn't drink, didn't cry. I just sat on the living room floor staring at a spot on the wall with one question echoing in my head. How long have they known, and why didn't anyone tell me? I stayed up all night, not from grief, but from the betrayal that seeped into every cell. Memories of Noah and me, our lakeside wedding, the evenings spent laughing over dinner, now twisted and shattered under the cold light of truth. I sat frozen on the sofa as my phone buzzed nonstop with texts from Mom, from Scott, from Isabel. "Eleanor, don't react yet, we can talk." "Sis, I know this is a lot, but please try to understand." "Sweetheart, please let me explain." I didn't answer any of them. No words could mend this fracture. Not after they stood there in silence, letting Isabel drop that bombshell in front of everyone. As if it were just a small detail in a party. The next morning, I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. The $2,500 monthly transfer to my parents was still active. I didn't hesitate. A few clicks and it was done. If they needed help, they could ask Isabel. She seemed to hold all the power in this family now. 3 days later, I received a large package from a law firm in Chicago. Inside was a thick stack of documents and a letter titled, "Notice of Claim for Inheritance Based on Legal Descendant Rights." I didn't need to read the whole thing to understand. Isabel was suing me, demanding half of Noah's estate, including the house I lived in, the downtown apartment, and the bank accounts I'd barely touched since his passing. The reason? She was carrying Noah's only child. I leaned back in my chair and let out a bitter laugh, one I never thought I'd make. The sister who once called me dearest was now trying to take everything I had left from a marriage that had already been ripped apart. I couldn't face this alone. I needed someone with experience, not just in law but in navigating delicate, complicated cases. I searched through a list of attorneys specializing in estate and posthumous disputes, and one name stood out among the rest. Marjorie Blake. A woman in her 50s, formerly with the district attorney's office, before opening her own firm. Marjorie was direct, no frills, but had a warm, sharp voice. We met at her office, a quiet space, with wood-paneled walls and soft light from an antique reading lamp. "I've reviewed the file," Marjorie said, placing the packet Isabel had sent on the table. "She has some evidence of a relationship with your husband, including text messages and photos. However," I looked up, "however what?" "We need to establish one thing first." Marjorie leaned in, her eyes razor-sharp. "The baby. Is he really Noah's biological child?" I was silent. Part of me wanted to reject the possibility altogether, but my rational mind told me the truth was the only thing that could save me now. "We need to request a DNA test," Marjorie continued, "and if possible, I'll need all of Noah's medical records, especially from the last few years before he passed." I nodded. "I'll look. There might be some documents in the safe at the downtown apartment." We signed the contract and began the legal proceedings that same week. Marjorie sent a formal response to Isabel's attorney, also submitting valid grounds to delay any asset transfer until a verified paternity result was available. That evening I returned to the downtown apartment, a place I had avoided because of the memories. It was quiet, even cold, but everything remained in place, just as it had been when Noah was alive. Inside the safe, I found a folder of medical records, heart ultrasounds, prescriptions, and a sealed envelope labeled Confidential. Fertility Diagnosis 2018. I opened it with trembling hands and then, like an unexpected blow, my eyes locked onto the bolded sentence in the middle of the page. Complete azoospermia, no sperm present in semen, confirmed inability to conceive naturally. My whole body went cold. I sank into the sofa, feeling like every sense I had shut down. If Noah couldn't have children, then whose baby was this? And more importantly, why was Isabel so confident she could sue me? A new wave of suspicion began to creep into my thoughts, this time not just about Noah, but about Isabel, and everyone who had blindly supported her. 2 days after finding Noah's medical record, I still hadn't slept properly. My mind kept replaying that sentence, confirmed inability to conceive naturally. I thought that was all I needed, a solid piece of evidence to stop Isabel from claiming any inheritance. But the story didn't end there. That morning, just as I poured my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, my phone rang. A number from out of state. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Eleanor Miller?" A gentle, older woman's voice tinged with unease. "This is she. My name is Gloria Barrett. I'm Noah's birth mother." I froze. Throughout our marriage, Noah had never mentioned his birth mother. He always told me he was orphaned at a young age and raised in the foster system. I had even once asked if he wanted to find his biological family, and he always avoided the topic. I'm sorry," I stammered. "I know this is sudden," Gloria continued, "but I just learned about Isabel and the baby, and I think I need to see you. There are things Noah never told you, things that might change everything." I was silent for a few seconds, trying to reframe everything I knew. Her voice didn't sound like someone chasing money or attention. It carried something tired, sincere, and strangely familiar. "Where are you?" I asked. We agreed to meet that afternoon at a small cafe in the West End, quiet enough that no one would notice two women trying to piece together the broken fragments of truth. When I arrived, Gloria was already seated, wearing a soft gray knit dress with her silver hair neatly pinned back. She looked nothing like I had imagined, not distant or worn down. Instead, her eyes were warm, and when I saw them I recognized them instantly. They were Noah's. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat down. "I'm not sure I'm ready for this," I said honestly, "but I also couldn't pretend I didn't hear your voice." Gloria nodded. She pulled out an old manila envelope and gently placed it on the table between us. "Noah and I lost contact for many years. When he decided to change his name, leave the old town and start over, I had no idea what happened. We had only just reconnected a few months before. The accident." Her voice caught in her throat. "I didn't know anything about his life with you, Eleanor, but I do know one thing. Noah was diagnosed with infertility back in 2016. This hospital," she tapped the envelope, "gave the diagnosis after several tests. He couldn't father a child, and I thought, if you didn't know that, you'd need proof." I took the envelope and slowly opened it. Inside was a set of medical documents labeled Hartford Urology Clinic, Fertility Assessment Results. Just like the one I had found, but more detailed, with the doctor's signature, dates, even scan images from the lab. "He never told me," I whispered. "I spent years thinking I was the one with the problem, while he knew the whole time and never said a word." "I know," Gloria said softly. "He was ashamed. He once told me, if I can't give my wife a family, what am I even worth? And then he just went silent and never brought it up again." I sat quietly for a long time, sunlight pouring onto the table like heat on my skin. The story of Noah, the man I loved, now lay in pieces I had never seen before. But I was also beginning to see clearly. Isabel was lying, and it wasn't just an ordinary lie. She had built a story to steal everything I had left from my broken marriage. "Can I ask you something?" I said, looking straight at Gloria. "Of course. If the court orders a paternity test, would you be willing to take a DNA test to prove the baby isn't related to Noah?" Gloria didn't hesitate. "I'm willing, not just to help you, but to protect my son's name. He can't speak for himself anymore, but I can." I gripped her hand, feeling for the first time in months a sense of grounding. As I left the cafe that day, I knew the battle ahead wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time since Noah passed, I felt like I could finally breathe. A full, deep breath, filled with resolve. The court date was set for a Monday morning in early fall, as golden leaves blanketed the pathway to the Rockbridge County Courthouse. I sat behind the wheel in the parking lot, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Gloria, in the passenger seat, gently touched my hand. "You don't have to be strong all the time," she said, her voice hoarse but steady. "Just breathe, Eleanor, we have the truth." I nodded, though my chest felt heavy. Even with the evidence, even with Gloria agreeing to the DNA test, the idea of facing my own family, the people I once leaned on, in a courtroom, felt like walking into a public dissection. The courtroom was large and bright, but the air was heavy like lead. Isabel sat in the front row wearing a simple black dress, cradling the sleeping baby wrapped in a soft cream-colored blanket. I recognized it, the hand-knit blanket I had given her at the baby shower. My parents sat on either side of her, eyes fixed on the judge, never once glancing in my direction. Scott wasn't there. I assumed even he felt things had gone too far. Isabel's lawyer began with a long speech, talking about the genuine love between Ms. Isabel Barrett and the late Noah Miller, about the rightful claim of a child to inherit from their biological father, and ultimately requesting the court award half of Noah's estate to the child they referred to as his only son. My attorney, Marjorie Blake, rose next. She didn't need many words. "Your Honor," she said firmly, "my client does not oppose protecting the rights of any child connected to her late husband. However, we have scientific evidence proving that Mr. Noah Miller could not be the biological father of this child." The courtroom stirred. Isabel shook her head, her lips pressed tight. My mother placed a hand on her shoulder as if to comfort her. "We respectfully submit to the court the DNA test results between Ms. Gloria Barrett, the biological mother of Mr. Noah Miller, and the child the plaintiff claims is her grandson." The judge took the sealed envelope, opened it, and read the results in a calm tone. "Based on genetic analysis, there is no biological relationship between Ms. Gloria Barrett and the child in question. Conclusion: Mr. Noah Miller is not the biological father of the child." The courtroom fell silent. I could hear nothing but the pounding of my own heartbeat. Isabel sat frozen for a few seconds, then suddenly burst into tears. But this time there were no fake sobs, no triumphant glances. Everything crumbled, clear and sharp as the midday sun pouring through the courtroom windows. I don't know what to do," she said, voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I just wanted to give my child a better start." The judge looked directly at her, his gaze firm but not cruel. "Ms. Barrett," he said, "you knew Mr. Noah Miller was deceased and unable to defend himself. Yet you deliberately used his name to claim financial benefits, knowing full well there was a strong possibility he was not the father. You provided false information, manipulated your family's emotions, and attempted to seize assets that did not belong to you." Isabel lowered her head, tears streaming down her face, her usual confidence gone. "I have no choice but to deny your entire claim," the judge declared, "and rule that the estate of Mr. Noah Miller remains the legal property of Mrs. Eleanor Miller. This hearing is adjourned." I exhaled, though my heart was still pounding. Gloria squeezed my hand tightly, as if passing along the strength she had carried for so many years. As I left the courtroom, my mother chased after me in the hallway. She stood there, her eyes wet with tears. "Eleanor, I didn't know it would come to this." I turned to her, strangely calm. "Yes, you did. You knew from the beginning." She said nothing. I looked at her one last time, then turned and walked straight outside, where warm sunlight was waiting. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, Isabel stood holding her son. Quiet. I didn't hate the child. He was just an innocent baby caught in the middle of an adult war. But I couldn't be their savior anymore. I had lost too much already, just to hold on to what I had left, my dignity and the truth. I didn't return to my parents' house after the hearing. I didn't answer any of their calls or messages. Maybe they hoped I would forgive them, or worse, return to the old role, the one who carried the burden, who endured in silence. But after everything, I had learned one thing. Sometimes in order to move forward, you have to walk away from the people you once called family. 3 weeks later, I did something I'd been thinking about ever since I walked out of the courtroom with Gloria. I transferred ownership of the downtown apartment to her. When I handed Gloria the signed property documents, she paused for a few seconds. "Eleanor, you don't have to do this. You've already lost so much. And I've gained something far more important than property," I interrupted with a smile. "If it weren't for you, I don't know what I'd have left." This isn't just a thank you, it's my way of saying, I've found my real family. Gloria hugged me. There were no tears, no grand words, just a warm, honest embrace, something I hadn't felt from my own blood relatives in a very long time. We started having dinner together every weekend. Gloria told me stories about Noah's childhood, things he'd never shared, like how he insisted on drinking cold chocolate milk every winter, how he once dreamed of becoming a graphic designer but switched to finance because it was more practical. I listened, feeling warmth and pain at the same time. But the pain no longer cut sharp. It had softened, becoming a memory to keep, not a burden to carry. I also returned to working full-time at the interior design firm. My first project back was redesigning a creative workspace for an art studio in Brooklyn. Standing in the empty room, sunlight streaming through tall glass windows, I realized I was seeing the world differently now. No more bitterness, no more resentment, just Eleanor. Calm, strong, and fully aware of her own worth. One weekend afternoon, as I sat sipping tea with Gloria in her new apartment, I opened my laptop and booked a flight to Seattle. A 10-day trip, just me. It would be the first time in years I traveled not for work, not for anyone else, but for myself. I wanted to hike Mount Rainier, watch the sunset over Elliott Bay, and breathe the kind of freedom I hadn't felt in far too long. A little treat for yourself? Gloria asked, raising an eyebrow at the printed itinerary on the table. Something like that, I smiled, or maybe a new beginning. Gloria nodded, her eyes shining with something that looked like pride. You're doing so well, Eleanor. My son? If he could see you now, I know he'd be smiling. I didn't respond, just gently placed my hand over hers. Sometimes, words aren't needed at all. And I also joined a local hiking group at Prospect Park. There were about 10 of us, ranging from college students to retirees. No one there knew me as the widow betrayed by her sister, or the woman taken to court over a child that wasn't even related. I was just Eleanor, the woman who loved nature, who liked climbing hills and watching the sunset through the trees. I found myself smiling more easily, laughing out loud when someone told a joke, not just politely smiling. I ate better, slept deeper. I began to believe that good things could still happen, not because I was lucky, but because I had chosen not to let the past imprison me. Isabel never contacted me again. I heard she moved to another state with a new boyfriend. My mother sent a handwritten letter, several pages long, apologizing and asking to reconnect. I didn't respond. Not out of hatred, but because I finally understood that some wounds only heal when you stop letting people touch them. Yes, I lost a family, but I found a new one. No shared blood, just shared sincerity. And on one early morning, as the first light streamed through the window, I looked in the mirror and saw a woman I had almost forgotten, myself, whole and free. From my own story, I realized that not everyone tied to you by blood deserves to be called family. And sometimes betrayal opens the door for us to find truth, dignity, and more genuine connections. I lost a lot: family, trust, even a part of my past. But I also found myself again. Life isn't always fair, but we always have a choice: let it drown us, or walk through it and begin again. I chose to keep going, and I've never regretted it. What do you think about Eleanor's story and the choices she made? Share your thoughts below. Don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt and meaningful stories about family, love, and the journey to rediscovering yourself.